I truly enjoyed the article that Duncan, Miller, and Sparks, the handout from them about if what really works in therapy. And what I enjoyed the most was the therapeutic pie. I'm a visual learner, so whenever it gave that description of a pie and relating it to the client and all the steps that go into counseling, it truly makes sense. Like, the client is the filling. They are the chocolate. And if the filling isn't there, then there's no purpose or reason for counseling. The person, the client, is the most important part of counseling. And in this analogy, it's the perfect part of the pie. Then it goes on to say that the relationship is the crust, which is also super important because that's where we learn about the client's resources, the ideas, and the participation. Then the actual smell and the look of it all is the expectancy, which we have to have some type of goal out there in order to be effective counselors. And finally, the meringue itself is the models and the techniques that we use throughout our journey. So this is a wonderful concept for new counselors to learn, as well as counselors that's been in it for a while, and then also our very seasoned counselors, because sometimes it's nice to have a refresher and to truly remember why we are counseling and how important the client is to our counseling profession. Also, going back to saying I'm a visual learner, I appreciated the pie graph that broke down the percentages of change, like how much the client factors in to the change that actually happens, and the relationship factors, and the expectancy, and also the models and the techniques to equal 100%. So, very appreciative of that article handout that we went over this week. As far as the reading from Erford, the 17, 18, 19, and 20, I truly appreciated how short the chapters were and how straight to the point they were about each of the humanistic approaches. So just to go back over this concept, let me back up. Let me go back to the handout. So why is that important? The concept of what I just told you about is helping the counselor keep a clear focus on the task at hand. And for my future career, I could use this pie observation when I'm speaking with a parent that might not understand why counseling is needed. Sometimes it's hard to break down those walls and really get a parent to understand when their child is hurting themselves or how they are having panic attacks, and being able to give them a visual thing to focus on to better understand why counseling is important, why the client is important. That would be very beneficial for that too. So moving back to Erford, sorry about that, the humanistic approach is what these chapters were talking about. It's how it's very relationship oriented. The focus is on the current and the future. The freedom and the responsibility to grow and develop as a client. Carl Rogers is the person-centered that we hear the most about. It's the personal growth, his 3 essential characteristics: empathy, genuineness, and unconditional positive regard. And then the 4 techniques: the self-disclosure, confrontation, motivational interviewing, and strength bombardment. So these concepts are important to know for my personal and professional self, because it's another technique that I can input into my counseling sessions with a variety of different ages. It says adolescents and young adults, which in the high school setting, I do work with that. And then on the clinical side, I worked with anyone from 4 to 61. So just having different techniques in a back pocket is always nice for a counselor. When something isn't working right, maybe be able to switch and be successful with another type of approach. So with my future career, knowing these techniques and knowing about the person-centered and having that empathy and just being able to show the client that you truly care about them is something important too. So that's the point of that concept for sure. So, the counselor's role is to gain insight, but also help the client recognize what they already know. Rapport, therapeutic alliance, and sharing of emotions, a lot of emphasis on that when talking about these techniques. So self-disclosure, that helps build the rapport with the client. Sharing a personal experience or sharing a genuine, authentic feelings, that breaks down those walls and really helps build the rapport with new clients and continuing throughout the counseling process. Also making sure your ethical responsibilities are met and all that good stuff. Confrontation, that's something I think that I definitely need to improve on, because that's when you're pointing out the discrepancies and the contradiction in what the client is saying versus their body language or how they're reacting. I actually used this example today when you're saying you're sorry. There's several different ways to say that you're sorry, and that is something that I pointed out to my student today. I was like, when you said you were sorry, you kind of smiled. I don't know. Can you tell me more about that? So just pointing out those discrepancies helps the client realize this is something serious, but my face is saying that I'm joking around. Also, the stages for that is listening for the discrepancies, summarizing and clarifying, confront empathetically, observe, and evaluate. So this concept is super important to learn and understand, because this is personal growth. This is your professional growth of being a counselor and taking the next step in the counseling process throughout the client. So with my future career, I definitely need to know these concepts to help with that. That's the Bell at School. Really motivating, let me tell you. Then another handout that I thought was super helpful. Sorry, I hope she went to the gym. The Zing Self-Related Depression Scale handout. Where has this been? This is the first time I've laid eyes on this, and I think that the questions are so real and easy for the client to rate 1 to 4. For example, I feel useful and needed. So the client, that's a positive one. So the client would rate themselves there. Or I get tired for no reason at all. Those are things that teenagers struggle with all the time. So if it's depression versus staying up too late playing Fortnite, different things, they're also conversation starters. Once it is completed, we can see, it's not so much depression, it's your daily healthy living. I just looked at my teeth. Daily process of that. So why is this important to my professional self? It's another resource that I can use in my sessions. For my future career, just having things, like I said before, something might not be working. So let's try something else. And having knowledge of this depression scale is just going to be another opportunity for me to help with my client. So thank you again and have a good one.